Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's member session. Yeah, so I think without further ado, we can get May and Danish to share about their presentation today.
Sure. Good evening, dear members. Thanks so much for coming today. I know it's Saturday night and it's not easy. So tonight, Danish and I will be sharing a topic on ESG compliant traceability in the supply chain. So next page, please.
Yep, sure. Wait, sorry. Can you guys see the screen as a full screen, or is it?
We see it as like we can see the slides on the side.
Oh, this one here, is it? Wait, hold on. What about now?
It's still the same. It's okay lah, I guess.
You're trying to do presentation mode, is it?
Okay, wait. Okay, what about now?
Now it's
worse.
Oh my god. Okay, sorry. Yeah, just let me.
Okay, it's okay. You can try again. Otherwise, I think just now was okay as well.
Okay, hold on. Sorry.
Oh, is this like your cheat sheet?
Yeah, wait, sorry. Let me just share my screen. Okay.
yeah. It's better now.
It's great.
Right? Okay, nice.
Okay. So we'll be covering content including the current state of the supply chain globally and some of the market best practices and existing traceability tools such as certification and technology. And finally, we will propose a traceability analysis framework. So next page. So I will be covering about the current state of supply chain and trying to do a summary. Yes. Sorry, can you click again? Oh yeah, so you can just show everything at once.
Okay.
Yep. So as we know, the reason why traceability is important to us is because of two major changes that are happening in the market. Firstly, the supply chain itself is getting more multi-tiered and complex. You can say that probably nobody on the supply chain can get a full picture of what's going on at every stage at the moment. So if we have traceability, we will be able to track the history of the product from its birth to its end. And without traceability, companies can never be able to credibly make any claims about their social and environmental impact. And the second change is in the external environment. So regulation authorities are laying out more stringent supply chain regulations, including mandatory due diligence on human rights violation and also environmental impact. And it's not just that, investors and consumers are also paying more attention to the ESG aspect of companies and the product they use as well. So from a survey that was given out to 3,000 managers, visibility and traceability is still one of the most popular way that companies choose to manage the ESG aspect of their company's supply chain. Next page, please. So what exactly can we trace? I believe on the environmental front, there is, of course, greenhouse gas emission, energy saving practices, and whether companies are using renewable energy. And there's water conservation and end of life management and circular economy. On the social front, people usually care about employee welfare and safety and local community impact and supplier diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also practices of fair trade and fair pay. Yep. So I guess there has been many instances of how ESG malpractices lead to negative financial consequences. But I think it's a misconception that only large multinational listed companies need to care about ESG. Because for now, for smaller companies, if you want to become part of the supply chain of a larger company, you also have to match the same standards. If you cannot do that, you may face risks such as product delisting and termination of business partnership. And that will definitely affect the financial outcome of your company as well, even if you're not listed. And next page. Other than the downside, I believe there are some opportunities in creating good traceability, because good traceability improves the management and it wins loyalty from downstream producers and also increase your company's valuation. I would like to break this down into revenue and cost side. The most proclaimed benefit of traceability is definitely reduction in counterfeits. So with that, you are able to recover revenue lost to the counterfeits and protect the rights of the consumers, preserve their intangible assets such as brand reputation and brand value. And with traceability, you are better able to manage the entire supply chain such that you can increase the quality of your product and service. So that will translate into higher sales performance. On the cost side, better management of supply chain also means fewer chances of defective products, process mistakes, mislabeling, loss of inventory, or employee misconduct. And with the entire map in mind, you are also able to pinpoint stages of supply chain where there's unnecessary consumption of energy and resources. So in that sense, you can better manage your resources. And we constructed this map to show the actions that can be taken at every stage of supply chain to improve traceability. But of course, companies also need to refer to sustainability standards and certifications to determine to what level they want to take this to. And another factor that companies need to consider is their IT readiness. Next. In fact, IT readiness is a substantial problem for a lot of suppliers because most of them, they do not have a single platform to share and collect information. Even if they want to integrate it into a new one, there are some resistance because they need to retrain their employees, and the employees, they're not necessarily happy about this. And most oftenly, they do not have enough financial capacity to change the entire system. And as for different firms along the supply chain, there's definitely an issue of lack of trust on data management. Because the profile of suppliers are so diverse, they will have different levels of understanding of what traceability means and how to do it. So this may create a lemon market whereby the poorer data providers benefit from the good data providers. And that may be a disincentive for companies on the supply chain to report their data truthfully. And also, the interoperability between different systems and software is another issue that we need to consider. And the most crucial problem is the lack of unified industrial traceability standard across different types of supply chain. Next page. So even good certification is actually not that easy. We will use the example of Fairtrade International to illustrate this. So in our mind, the most ideal situation is to have different products separately, and each of them have a history that can be backtraced. And if the history is clean, then we can label them as fair trade. Well, this doesn't apply to certain types of goods. For example, if we are trying to label coffee beans, we cannot take individual coffee bean out and try to tell a story based on that. It's just not feasible to do so. So the Fairtrade International also made a concession to allow a certain level of ambiguity. So as long as the retailers, they are able to keep sustainable goods and non-sustainable goods separately, they can make sustainability claims. But most of the time, for the sake of efficiency or environmental purposes, the retailers, they just mix all the goods together. So if that's the case, Fairtrade only allows the retailers to sell the equivalent percentage of goods as Fairtrade. For example, if 50% of your coffee bean is sustainable, then you can only sell 50% of your goods as Fairtrade. So I guess ultimately it comes down to the problem of economics of scale. So as the sustainability market expands, we will be able to overcome this problem. So I will pass on my time now.
Yeah, thanks, Mimi. So now we'll go through the best market practices for supply chain traceability. And we looked at a couple of companies who are at the forefront of adopting traceability systems and processes in their companies and throughout their supply chain. So we'll take a look at Wilmar and Cargill. They are both agriculture companies. And we broke them down into different features of their traceability systems or frameworks in place. So first is the definition. So what does traceability mean to them? So like for Wilmar and Cargill, traceability means having visibility all the way to the palm oil plantations and the mills that process the palm oil. Next is target setting. So what have they actually planned and what strategies are in place? What is the roadmap to trace all the way back to the producers themselves? So they actually have a time-bound plan. So in the case of like Wilmar, they have like a 2030 plan where they want to reach 100% traceability and visibility for both their direct and indirect suppliers. And the next key feature we looked at is their approach. So it's a bit wordy here, but what I'll say is that these are certain actionables that they have planned out, or rather that they are already executing now. So in terms of, let's say, look at Wilmar, no deforestation, peat development, and no exploitation of workers policy. So this policy is strictly applicable to all their suppliers, and they actually do get their suppliers to also spread this down to their own other suppliers. Yep. And a couple of the other things such as grievances. So what grievances are is really to track any certain incidents that have occurred at the suppliers' sites. And they actually, in the case of Cargill, they actually have a database online. We can all access it and can see, for example, they have a mill at maybe Indonesia and certain incidents that have actually occurred and what are their what is their response to that specific incident. The next feature is on monitoring and verification. So like both Wilmar and Cargill over here, they actually do have deforestation monitoring. So they use satellite systems and radar technology to actually look at the radius, or rather the areas of forests where their producers' sites are located at. Technologies, and they also have third-party assessors to make sure that the information on traceability and the ESG matrix of their supplier sites are verified. And the last feature is standards and certification. So as mentioned by Mimi earlier on, like fair trade, for example, aside from fair trade, there are other various supply chain sustainability and traceability certification. So let's look at Wilmar's. They actually have this thing called the RSPO, which is Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, which is internationally adopted. So what that ascertains, right, is really the fact that the palm oil mills and the plantations are meeting certain sustainability criteria. So what we get from this to later on build our traceability protocol is this preliminary assessment helps us look at these traceability practices. It's a strong basis for our framework in terms of the variability, but also the breadth in their programs. And some of these elements you will see later on will absorb it into our analysis framework for traceability. The next case study that we're going to look at is really over the research and looking at different companies. How do you then trace the pathway for supply chain? So what does full traceability actually look like at every phase of the supply chain? So you have first and foremost the commodity producers, and you need their buy-in and their collaboration. So what their traceability responsibilities are, for example, is recording the production, the extraction of raw materials, and conveying this information or this traceability data to other actors as well. So for example, they will then relay this information to first aggregators who will collect, or rather they purchase from all these like different palm oil plantations. And Wilma is an example who is a first aggregator. I won't go into every traceability responsibility here, but mainly to really efficiently, but also in a well-organized manner, log all this information into a database. For example, the geo coordinates of the palm oil plantations and mills, the name of this ownership of the name of the ownership of the producer site, total volumes and percentages, and so on, even certification of the producer sites. So they record all this and they relay on next to the Tier 1 suppliers. So Tier 1 means your direct suppliers of the retail companies. For example, we have Cargill, who is a direct supplier. They will maintain a list of the first aggregators that they deal with for their business. So they will log in data on incoming shipments, verify the quality, and label appropriately, labeling such as the fair trade certified products. And then they will relay this right down to the retail company. So PepsiCo, I'm sure many of you know Pepsi, and what Pepsi should do, this list right here of traceability responsibility. So taking that information, recording it down, ensuring that the whole supply chain, their incentives, but their objectives are also aligned, to communicate and engage with them on Pepsi's traceability program, make sure they understand the know-how on how to log data and all that, and to last but not least, report and disclose that traceability data periodically to other stakeholders like us, consumers, or even their investors. So a preliminary assessment for this would be that this could serve as a secondary checklist when we assess companies' traceability communications processes. So moving on to existing traceability tools, we have some certifications, and we'll run through some technologies that are currently in the market to enable traceability. So we'll take a look at three key sustainability certifications providers. Some are actually structured more broadly and may go beyond adherence to laws. There are so many certifications out there, but what's their credibility? So I won't go through everything, but we have ISCC, RSPO, as I've mentioned, and EcoVadis, which is a sustainability assessment and rater. But we broke them down into certain key features as well, such as the traceability models, what kind of assessment, their assessment methodologies, what chain of custody models do they cover. So Meme has gone through the three earlier on, but ISCC and RSPO, they do physical segregation and mass balance. And in the middle, where all the words are their various assessment methodologies. So what does traceability mean to them, and what will they look to measure and certify or verify? So in the case of like RSPO, number one, commit to transparency, comply with applicable laws, and so on and so forth. Kind of like looking at the ESG metrics of the supplier side. So let's say if the palm oil plantation in Indonesia meets all these 8 requirements for RSPO in the middle, they will qualify and be eligible for an RSPO certification, which could set them apart from other palm oil producers. We looked at the different industry coverage and the statistics to really see how extensive, how wide scale is their certification, and how widely adopted. So what we've noticed from all these certifications, when we want to assess their credibility, we can look at these 5 things. The first is the scope of the certification. So what parts of the supply chain do they cover? Do they just cover the plantations, or do they cover plantations, mills, the first aggregators, and so on? The second is on the breadth and depth of metrics. How many metrics, but also are these ESG metrics very material to the business of the retail company or the supply chain? Number 3 is industry coverage, so number of certifications issued, so to see their expertise in this field. Number 4 is their alignment to regulations, laws, or do they go beyond that? So RSPO, in the sustainable palm oil industry, RSPO is not the only certification, there are others. But RSPO has shown that they will go beyond certain laws and regulations on what constitutes as sustainable palm oil. And the last is transparency, where do they show how do they develop their standards, their assessment methodology, and do they show the auditing results. And this is complemented by verification bodies. So if you look at the top right, there's Bureau Veritas, Control Union, SGS. You may not know these names, but they are basically global players in the verification industry. They go down to the ground, they go on site to really look and help out with the assessment and the certification process. So 5 things. Number 1 is that these, like for example, Bureau Veritas or whatnot, they have to be a member of International Accreditation Forum. Number 2, their audits have to conform with ISO standards. So ISO is a global player in all the safety standards, the sustainability standards. They have to follow ISO Guide 65, which lays out the groundwork for certification process workflows. Number 4 is on auditing and certification, should be complying with ISO standard as well. And number 5, the employees of these verification bodies must be qualified to conduct an audit. And now next, let's take a look at the technology. So we'll take a look at 5, but what you'll see is that blockchain has the capabilities to unlock better transparency. It's based on 6 functionalities. So how we assess the technology is first to look at identification. So whether they are able to identify the product uniquely. So let's say for in the case of barcodes, the specific barcode can actually trace which apple, for example, which apple is it, where did it come from, and so on. And the second function is location. So that second column over there, the point of origin. So where did this apple come from? Sensors would be throughout the journey of the apple from the farm all the way to the supermarket shelf. What kind of, does it track the data and measure the data all the way? Comms would be, does this technology allow you to track, measure all this data, but also communicate it to the system, to the traceability system, or rather the enterprise or the company's database. Data storage should be how much data can a barcode hold, not as much as it would for a blockchain system. And the logic behind it would be, does this technology, so with all these metrics, right? Logic means, does it allow the retail company to paint a picture, or rather give an insight or analytics, sort of analytics to identify certain gaps. So if the temperature varies throughout the supply chain for the apple, wherever it's stored throughout the supply chain, if it varies a lot, logic would allow the company to tell, like, okay, there's a problem here, and we need to rectify it. Yeah. Won't go through all the descriptions, but yeah, what you can basically see is that Internet of Things and blockchain really tackles all these 6 functions very well, and they are the future of traceability. So yeah, 1D, 2D barcodes, for example, and RFID tags, which you may have seen before. But the preliminary assessment here is based on 6 things. So first is the functionalities, as I've mentioned. The second would be interoperability. So even despite having all these 5 technologies here, right, does it work with one another very well and work with your current legacy systems in your companies, the database that you have? Number 3 would be data requirements mapping and granularity of data. So application areas must be measured in real time. Blockchain, for example, will allow you to really keep track right to the second as your product moves throughout the supply chain. And what kind of visibility do you have? Is it just from your direct suppliers or all the way down to the farms or the processing sites? Data management would be consistency, immutability of data, and the accuracy. Is it easy to manipulate the data, or is it not? Is there data protection practices or features in place. Number 5 would be standards and certification. So aside from fair trade, right, that was more of like product focus, but there are standards and certifications on traceability technologies and systems. So we didn't include it here, but happy to share after the presentation, of course. But basically, you can look at GS1. GS1 is a global traceability system standard. So they'll actually give guidelines on how companies can develop their systems and be able to achieve full supply chain traceability. And number 6 is any supporting technologies such as customer relationship management database and so on. And with all this information, right, we came up with a traceability analysis framework. So it's based on 6 pillars. It's sort of like an assessment checklist for us to assess the robustness of companies' traceability programs. When we do our investments, when we say ESG, are we going down all the way to just their business and operations? For example, if I look at Meta, is it just Meta, or am I looking at Meta's whole supply chain? So Mei and I believe that this assessment checklist helps you to achieve the latter. The first would be on traceability strategy. So what kind of do they even have a program in place? Is it publicly disclosed, and what are their ambitions or their goals? Any policy settings? Are the policies just within their own business, or is it throughout the supply chain? What are the definitions and methodologies? The second pillar is on traceability processes and practices. So do they have a robust traceability protocol in place? What is their traceability criteria? And how do they monitor these processes? And that's complemented by a robust grievance mechanism. The third is on standards and certification. So what we went through, they align to that? Do they go beyond it? Do they have external certifications accredited to them? Fourth is due diligence. So a risk-calibrated approach. So do they label their suppliers as low, medium, or high risk in terms of traceability or ESG? And how do they measure and report these ESG KPIs? Number 5 is supply chain engagement. So do they mean what they say? Do they just have a program, but it's not communicated, or is it not communicated to their suppliers? Do they give trainings to their direct and indirect suppliers on what is good traceability, or even active participation and collaboration with third-party NGOs? And the last is technology capability. So it's really just what we went through earlier on. So with all these 6 pillars, we believe that you can achieve full supply chain traceability. So how does this look like if we were to use it? So this is a proposed traceability analysis framework at play. We'll take a look at PepsiCo as a case study, and we actually came up with a checklist based on these 6 pillars that we went through early on. I'm not going to go through everything, but it's really diving right into the details of each pillar. And of course, this is based on all the best market practices, the globally accepted standards, what they've mentioned in their guidelines. And with this checklist, we believe that PepsiCo is an above average performer in full supply chain traceability. Green means they have it. Yellow means they do mention it, but it's not publicly, it's not sufficient, or rather it's not meeting all the key metrics. Yeah. And red means they have no public disclosures, or rather they don't have any of these practices in place at all. Yeah, so with that, thanks for your attention, and we will welcome any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? So you all came up with this framework yourself, is it? Or like, is it an existing framework?
Yeah, we came up with it ourselves.
Oh, okay, that's so cool.
Thanks. Yeah, Pauline, the GS1 is what you showed. I mean, that's what I was referring to. Thanks.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Sorry, I know it's quite a lot of info on the slides.
Okay, so for me, I'll probably just take this opportunity to complement the level of detail you all go to describe ESG with regards to supply chain on a supply chain basis. I think it's very well detailed and it's quite informative.
Oh, thanks, Visham.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, appreciate
Thanks for the compliment.
the compliment. Yep.
Quick question. So in coming out of this framework, like what do you guys reference, or like what research do you guys do?
Yeah, thanks for the question, John Lon. Is that am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah, John is fine.
John, okay, yeah. So yeah, Mimi and I, of course, I mean, it's such a huge topic, right? And I think even with this, we are just scratching the surface. But I guess first and foremost, we decided to take a look at what supply chain sustainability means. Traceability and sustainability are two different things, but Mimi and I believe that without traceability, there's no sustainability. So we dove a little, we tried to look a little deeper into what traceability means, and what logistics, I guess logistics companies deal the most with supply chain. So we took a look at that. It really is just the case studies. For example, yeah, the Wilma and Cargill. We looked at other companies as well, but to see what they do, I think you all can take a look at Pepsi's traceability protocol. So Pepsi has a traceability protocol that's publicly available. They apply it to all their suppliers, and it's very, very comprehensive. And I guess Meme and I, like, we learned a lot, like, from that, just by reading that protocol. It's quite long. Yeah, but that's one. And then we looked at global standards, so like fair trade. Fair trade and the GS1 that Berlin kindly sent in the group. Sorry, yeah, fair trade. And they really, I mean, yeah, they really like listed out what traceability means. So, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Actually, I'm quite curious about the technologies. If you don't mind going to that slide.
Yeah, sure.
Because currently it seems like the different technologies are ranked such that blockchain is basically the best and 1D barcodes is the worst, right? So I'm just wondering, like, which is the most common right now, and is there a need to have like a mix of all of them? Because if blockchain has like all of the functions, can we just like use blockchain? Like, I'm just not very sure how it works.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. Mimi, you wanna have a go or not?
Sure, I can explain a bit. I'm not super pro in this. But I think blockchain is kind of difficult because it requires every supplier to have the capacity to be integrated into the system. So if some suppliers that are not up to standard, they can only use 1D or 2D or the RFID tags. Actually, before doing the research, I thought 1D and 2D barcodes are the most common. But now that I recall, I think we've seen a lot of RFID tags around also. So if you go to Watson's, then you see the cosmetics products, you often see a metal bar stick to it, then they use the scotch tape to tap around. They use a lot for this, especially for goods that has high counterfeit risks. Yes.
Mm.
IoT and blockchain is more commonly used in e-commerce because they have the money and the scale to do this. But if a single company tries to do it, it's a bit difficult.
Okay, so that's why we're kind of like still at the RFID tags level, because that one is kind of like easier to use with all the suppliers, because not that many people are on the blockchain or like the IoT sensor network yet.
Yeah, RFID is simple because it's just a chip integrated to the tag. So still easy.
Okay. Then for this case, right, like the RFID tags and all the supply chain traceability, it's mainly for the company themselves to take note, right? For instance, like Wilmar wants to take note of its own supply chain, but like, how much of it is actually like open up to consumers? Maybe I'm not aware of this, but I don't really feel like we have that much transparency in terms of the supply chain. Like, I can't go into a shop in Watsons and then I'll just like click a product and then I can find out about its entire supply chain. So like, do they allow consumers to have that kind of information, or is more of like within the company itself internally for them to track?
I think some companies like Adidas, they allow consumers to have such information. So they have this 2D barcode on a tag. Then if you scan it, you will be able to see kind of the story of the product. But I don't think they will, how to say, disclose every single detail to consumers. But it's just to assure consumers that the product you're purchasing is sustainable. It's ethically right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think like some of the products, when you go into the supermarkets or what, and you see certain fruits or even like cocoa beans or like coffee, you will see like at the back of the packagings, you'll see like Fair Trade certified or Rainforest Alliance certification. So I mean, it doesn't paint the whole picture of what the supply chain looks like, but it kind of tells you that they sustainably sourced it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then the portion where you said like there's one is like certification, one is like the verification board, right? So basically they work together, is it? Or is it
Yeah.
two separate schemes?
They work together. So like
The verification board helps to audit for the certification board.
yes, correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because
Anyone else
you
have questions? Oh, sorry.
no.
Sorry, continue.
As in that's just to like, I mean, if you want to go a step further, right, to just see that the certificate isn't just like a loosey-goosey thing, and that a real global player in the verification and audit services industry actually uh, uh, certified that, or rather audited and verified that they meet all the certifications requirements. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else has any questions? Yeah, if no one else have any questions, then I think we can close off today's session. Yeah, thank you so much. It was very in-depth. I feel very impressed with each ESG presentation that we have. Maybe you guys want to share your slides in the WeCom chat so everyone can just refer to it even if they can't make it today.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep,
Yes,
thanks
thank
for-
you.
Bye.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Guys.